Hello, I'm Janet Lambert, the CEO of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, and it's my pleasure to be here today at the World Orphan Drug Congress. I'm joined today by Suneet Varma, the Global President of the Rare Disease Business Unit at Pfizer. Welcome, Suneet.
Oh, thank you so much. Good to see you again, Janet, and so happy to be here at WODC.
So our topic today, Suneet, is turning the promise of orphan drugs into reality. And I'm so looking forward to the conversation because I know you have a terrific perspective on this. I come to it, as you know, mostly from the cell and gene therapy perspective, but your remit is even broader. So as you look across the industry and you see this robust pipeline of breakthrough orphan drugs that could be coming to market in the very near future, do you think the healthcare system is ready for them? What do you see as the main obstacles and barriers that we face right now in getting these therapies to patients?
Oh, no, absolutely, Janet. And just to comment really briefly, you're right. The remit within Pfizer for rare disease includes gene therapy. And by the way, that's central to our innovation thesis. And I'm sure many companies in this space as well. But we also do, you're right, look at small molecule, large molecule devices, diagnostics, really looking at all modalities to impact patients' lives. I think rare disease and gene therapy overall is a very exciting place to be right now. And we're really on the tipping point of a new era in science that could profoundly change the lives of those that we aim to serve. But it's not without its challenges, to your point. There are several challenges that I think we're going to have to face. But before I sort of go into what those challenges might be and how we might overcome them, this is an analogy we use within my own team here at Pfizer. And that is that we think about this as planes getting ready to land at an airport, because that's how much innovation is coming our way. And at least where I live in New Jersey, if you look up at Newark Airport, you can see the line of planes queued up for miles on a clear day. And one by one, air traffic control brings them in safely and efficiently that are queued up in the sky. I really see gene therapy and rare disease in a similar way. We've got a group of committed professionals, and we can see all those medicines or treatments up in the sky, and they're all getting ready to land. And we have a line of sight to that, and it's our job to land them safely and effectively, and essentially, bring them, put them in the hands of patients. So it's very exciting, but of course that is always a challenge because there is inherent complexity. I think some of the things that we look at are, of course, in our area, we look at how we discover these medicines. That's, of course, a challenge that we want to overcome. How we develop these medicines, and then ultimately how we deliver them into the hands of patients. So from a discovery point of view, rare diseases are particularly challenging because of the inherent nature of small patient populations, sometimes endpoints that have never been defined or well understood because so many rare diseases, have been untreated for so long. Sometimes we have, hard to find patient groups, depending upon which disease or therapeutic area we're studying. And I would even argue diagnosing those patients once you find them can be a challenge, et cetera. So, when it comes to discovery, that presents a whole host of challenges unto themselves. In terms of development, I think this is a really interesting time for us because we really need to look at the timelines of how we bring these to patients. It's a different challenge altogether. Many of the activities we're doing are in parallel with overlapping steps, which are non-traditional. We're looking at new pathways to bring these medicines to market. And those are all creating new challenges for the regulatory authorities as they learn along with the industry, with academia, with universities, with hospitals and other treaters. And we're all sort of upscaling our skills together. And that is a challenge that I also see us overcoming as we move forward. And ultimately, we're going to have regulatory capacity with the right skilled reviewers in different divisions of different regulators around the world. And lastly, I would point out delivery. And when we talk about delivery, what does that mean? It means getting these in the hands of patients, the ones that need them. And that is really about access. And access and affordability is absolutely a hot area when it comes to rare disease, orphan drugs, and in particular, rare disease. And what we've seen are very novel and creative ways to addressing them. For example, in the UK, I was pleased to read recently that the Innovative Medicines Fund which was primarily focused on oncology before, has now been expanded in scope and scale to address rare diseases as well. So when you put all this together, you can see this excitement, all these opportunities queued up to land, but really, how are we going to bring them to fruition by overcoming these challenges that I just mentioned? Very exciting, but challenging time.
Yeah, it's such an evocative image, that idea of all these planes circling the airport. So let's talk some more about landing the plane. You identified that there's some of these challenges are inherent in treating a rare disease in a small population, often with a limited number of patients, pretty distributed. And you talked about the fast pace of science and the challenges that's creating for all of us, but specifically for regulators. And then this set of challenges around kind of market access or getting from approval to actually a system in which patients can receive a therapy and developers can be paid for it in a way that continues to foster the whole system. So here we are with all these planes circling. What do you think are the first few steps you're trying to take to overcome that range of obstacles that you just described?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just start off by saying, me personally, and the unit that I lead at Pfizer and our organization at large is absolutely committed to overcoming these obstacles to bring these breakthroughs to the rare disease community. So let's take that as a foundation of our purpose and what we're trying to achieve. I think at the most fundamental level, investment in innovation is one of the first principles that we operate to overcome these challenges, and that of course fuels discovery. And really, this is a pioneering area, especially gene therapy, where we're all, as I mentioned, learning together, and that includes the entire community of rare disease researchers and otherwise that are going at these problems. I think another key area for us is early engagement with external stakeholders. Okay, there's a lot of education that has to happen. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with governments, regulators, scientists, et cetera, to try to figure out these complex problems. So we're working together in ways that are what I think are going to be these new standards for the future of how we're going to attack these really complex challenges. And lastly, as you mentioned, access. We have to really be innovative in how we think about value models or payment models. This is an area, especially gene therapy, where we think we're going to need more outcomes-based agreements. This is an area where we're going to have to be more flexible, such as annuity models, where rather than lump sums being paid, they can be paid over time. We're going to have to look at risk pooling and other mechanisms, which would allow for different governments or payers to have certainty in how they manage their budgets, while at the same time providing access to those patients that need them, in the here and now. So I think that is sort of, when you put it all together, it's pretty exciting. Now within Pfizer, just to be clear, we look at that sort of discover, development, and deliver as the value chain for gene therapy to come to market. On the discovery side, we've invested heavily in AAV technology. Okay, we see it as a platform that can be applied to many other areas. So that's one of our investments, let's say, in innovation. We also look at the development, and we are using our worldwide footprint of sites around the world for clinical trials to make sure that we get as quick as we can enrollment, but at the same time, representation from as many countries as possible in the spirit of equity and making sure that patients are included everywhere they can be. And I think that in terms of delivery, I mentioned access already, but I'll mention manufacturing as well, which is, this is a complex area, which is highly specialized. And I think that we have thankfully been fortunate to be part of Pfizer at this time and made significant investments in advance of the delivery of our gene therapies to market. And we, for example, in our Duchenne's muscular dystrophy program, we have enough capacity to supply the whole world at launch for our DMD gene therapy. So that investment, which started half a decade ago, has really allowed us to get to this point that it's not just about discovery, it's not just about the development, but we're also thinking about that delivery to the patient when the time comes.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to that point about manufacturing, but let me ask another question first. Obviously, one of the things, we've been talking about all the excitement about what's going on in the rare disease space and what's going on in Pfizer rare disease, but from what I gather from the news, a few other things have been going on at Pfizer too. And needless to say, you have been, as a company, front and center in the COVID battle. So I wanted to ask you, when we look at sort of the rare disease pipeline, right? We're now tracking 63 cell and gene therapies, mostly gene therapies in development for rare disease. 6 of those are in phase 3. So to us, that is a very robust gene therapy pipeline because it's early days in gene therapy. But of course, with 7,000 rare diseases, that pipeline is nowhere near full enough. So what have you learned in the, what have you learned in the process of developing a response to COVID and the vaccines for COVID that might inform how we speed development for gene therapies and other therapies for rare disease?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jen, I'm so glad you mentioned that because you're right. In Pfizer, we've become quite known for our response during the time of COVID. And it's something that I, along with my teammates at Pfizer, are very proud of. All of us have played a role in some way or some form in being part of the company during this amazing time. And I would say that if you take a step back, the pandemic really sparked or has sparked a period of unparalleled innovation in the world of science. And in this case, the world of science has really come together with the power of collaboration. And that collaboration is, really looking at the entire ecosystem around, how you bring a new medicine or a new treatment to market. And you do it as quickly and efficiently as you can, but with the same high standards that you would expect for efficacy and safety. And that's something that we're very proud of. I'm personally proud of, my team is. And then we say, now let's take another step back. And how would we apply that to rare disease? Okay, because there's no less urgency for those patients that are suffering from rare disease and waiting for, as you pointed out, these new gene therapies to come. Smaller number now, but as you and I know, multiples, and I'm not talking about going from a dozen to 100, but let's say 100 to more than 1,000 in the future, in this coming decade that we're in, 2020 to 2030, let's say. So I think what we've learned is that our ability to partner in society and with regulators, et cetera, has become a huge source of strength. And that multilateral collaboration is what has really led to all these great breakthroughs. So I think that if you think about regulators, they have done many things which are very positive and have worked, such as we have fast track designation, we have Europe, there's a prime designation, there's breakthrough designations, RMAT, et cetera. So you have so many of these designations which have been helpful in how do we speed and how do we make the benefit of these treatments come as quickly as they can. But I think what I've seen during COVID is it's not enough. Or said another way, we saw during COVID, more can be done. And so how do we start from where we are, take where we are now and go one step further? And I think the examples that we saw that I would love to be able to apply to rare disease, okay, let's take a couple examples. Quickly reviewing clinical protocols, okay? This is things that used to take like months or years, and we saw it happen in weeks. And so we know it can be done, and that can sometimes be a rate limiting factor. And so let's try to do that faster in our programs, just like we saw here. When we do IND filing applications in the US, sometimes that takes a month, to get feedback, but we saw it happened in a mere days in this scenario. So we said, wow, well, maybe there's a way to do that here. And then you look at it and say, sometimes we just want to have consultation and we want to get advice from our partners at regulators. That rapid delivery of advice is something that we think could be a key success factor. And that happened because obviously there was a mindset shift that we saw, but also there was virtual engagements. Like, we were doing things by Zoom and by WebEx and by Teams and every other digital virtual means available. Why does that have to be a special situation only during pandemic? Why don't we employ these techniques even post-pandemic? So you can see that there's many things that have come out of the pandemic that really supported this period of unprecedented innovation that I would love to be able to apply in rare disease. And I can tell you that the patients I've spoken to and the people in my, we all want to do that. And because we see that things can be done better, faster, with the high quality and standards that we know we want to deliver.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more with you here at ARM, watching as some of those very same things that you spoke about, and kind of anticipating, boy, if we could sustain some of that flexibility and that rapid response time and that ability to have kind of in-process consultation, it really could, I think, go very far in a field like gene therapy, where there are so many things, as you've said before, we're kind of figuring out together. So on that point, let me go back to the comment that you made about manufacturing, and clearly manufacturing is a real significant obstacle in gene therapy, or a challenge, I should say, in gene therapy development. And we've seen that over the course of the last year, as a number of therapies, I think, have been slowed down, in part because of some issues related to CMC regulation. So let me ask you for your comments about what are the unique challenges for gene therapy manufacture, and here too, if you learned any lessons from your COVID experience that you're now trying to bring to bear on your gene therapy portfolio.
Yeah, absolutely, Janet. It is a highly complex and resource intensive process for us, and as you mentioned, we're all learning this together. I really see us as regardless of whether you're in the four walls of Pfizer, or you're at ARM, or you're sitting in the audience at this Congress or another company, we're all learning these things together. And I think that, let's say, collective body of knowledge is what is really exciting, and frankly, it's needed if we're going to be able to ultimately bring these products to market. There are real questions out there about, is there enough capacity to deliver all the products that are currently under development to patients in need? And I think that's why, I'm pleased at what we've done in terms of our advanced investment, but more needs to be done. But let me start off with Pfizer. So, we made an investment, as I mentioned, half a decade ago in North Carolina to really, and I say North Carolina with a smile, because we have 3 sites in North Carolina, and that's become a hotbed for the activity that we think that's important, not just for us, but for everybody. So let me unpack that for a second. So we have our research scale and our production in North Carolina, and we do that with good laboratory practices, or GLP. But we also have our clinical scale manufacturing at another site, which we do with GMP process, and we have a third site that essentially has scaled up and now will allow us to produce what we believe is the full go-to-market supply that patients would need when we can launch it. And so that fully integrated suite of sites combined is about 300,000 square feet, and we are one of the few companies that can produce at 2,000 liter bioreactor capacity. So we look at that and say, well, that's great. We are, let's say, ready, willing, and able when the time comes to do it. But I think, as you mentioned, it's also important to make sure that what ultimately we go to market with is also what we've run with in our clinical studies, and it's all to the same standard. So our ability to use commercial grade material in our clinical studies is also one of our key success factors. And I think these are things that, if you had gone back 5 years ago, we might not have contemplated that would be something that would be important, but now we see how important it is. The scale that you're going to need, the systems that you have that connect all the individual pieces from clinical to commercial scale are really important. So that's kind of how we've put it together. And I would go one step further, because you mentioned COVID, and that is something that I had not anticipated at the beginning of the pandemic that would come into play. So, for example, cold chain logistics are something that we believe are a critical success factor in gene therapy. And ultimately, we have to be able to ship and maintain the integrity of our treatments at ultra low temperatures as they essentially are packed and delivered and for treatment at a qualified treatment center for patients. And that's something that we were working on behind the scenes at Pfizer in preparation for our gene therapies. Well, when COVID came along and we developed our COVID vaccine, Comirnaty, what we saw is that, well, actually that has to also go, mRNA technology, that has to go at the same analogous conditions, ultra low temperatures, storing it in cool. And so our team pivoted from the gene therapy to whatever work we had done to date into supplying cold chain logistics for the vaccine. And now we all know how that works. If actually all around the world, it was a big problem in the media about a year ago, I would say, and then we solved that. And now we're pleased to say that we're on track for 3 billion doses of COVID vaccine this year. And that's publicly disclosed. So that's very exciting, all enabled by that cold chain. Now, here's what's very exciting. We've solved that cold chain logistics problem that we were working on for gene therapy. We solved it in COVID, and now it's been flipped back to us saying, hey, we solved it, it's ready to use, and now we're able to, with certainty, work with a full solution. So we're really happy because it accelerated our cold chain logistics. So in other words, if we got to go, we got it from point A to point B, and then COVID took it from point B to point C, we end up with a finished solution for ourselves as well in rare disease. And that's the power of an enterprise with scope, with scale, that you can have a platform which can apply to multiple areas, not just vaccines, but also rare disease and gene therapy.
I think we have time for one more question, Suneet. So let me ask you this, because when we talk about access and affordability for new medicines, we know there's major challenges there that need to be addressed. In your view, what are the biggest issues that could prevent gene therapies from reaching patients, and what should we do about it?
Yeah, it's something we've mentioned before, and I know it's on the minds of many, including the patients. And I think that we're in a unique position now to shape the environment. Now, it's not to say that there aren't gene therapies that have come. There have, and we've learned from them. But I think ultimately, given the ramp up we see in this new era of gene therapy going forward, the amount of treatments that could be available will require us to think differently in this space of access and affordability, and how we're going to essentially pay for all these things, and how they're going to have the maximum impact. So I think that we have to think about this in a very different paradigm. So this is a lifetime benefit that is theoretically, can be derived from these products, and we have to make sure in the payers' minds, in other words, they're paying this, that we can give them new ways to assess value and connect that value to the outcomes that are associated with these patients. So it's a different way to look at it. In rare disease, it's always a challenge because external stakeholders have traditional ways of looking at the benefits and the value of medicines. But what do you do when it's not chronic, when it's a one-time treatment? What do you do when it's something you have to do long-term monitoring on, let's say, and follow up on the outcomes of those patients? So I think that our ability to work with those payers and come up with unique and creative ways is a critical success factor. So one of the areas that is outcome-based agreements, another way is annuity models, a third way is risk pooling. Let me just mention what I mean by a couple of those. So outcomes-based agreements are a way to look at and say, the value of the medicine could be more directly associated with the performance of the treatment. And therefore, you can look at key success factors in a gene therapy patient like durability or expression, things that we look at and say, this is why we're doing this, and this is the outcome we wish to see. And we're willing to create a pay-for-performance model, which we think is appropriate for whatever the therapeutic area that is that we're looking for. When you look at annuity models, as I mentioned, if you take a certain product and it's taken in 1 year, it might not make sense to pay for that all in that 1 year. Maybe we should spread those payments over a few years so that it's manageable within a country's budget. And by the way, even though the treatment might be done in 1 year, so we say one and done lifetime treatment, it is not a give and forget category, right? We are still going to have a relationship and a connection with this patient over time. So there's ways to spread the payments over the relationship time of that with that patient to make sure that we're monitoring and following up to make sure that they have the right outcome. Now, risk pooling, that's more about insurers. We've seen them do unique treatments, say in the field of behavioral health, where different healthcare plans may consolidate those types of patients together into a more specialized provider, so that those health plans can have certainty around what their liability and affordability will be, and at the same time making sure patients get treated. So there's lots of ways that I can see that we could really change the environment for the better for the future. And it's not just something that we'd like to see. I think it's something that we need to see. Otherwise, we will not realize the full potential of gene therapy.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're absolutely right about that. And as you know, Bob Smith, the head of your gene therapy business, and ARM and many others have been working on the public policy aspects of trying to enable those kind of innovative payment models that you just described. I think they really are going to be vitally important. You know, I wish we had a bunch more time, because I'd love to ask you many more questions and continue this really important conversation. But I think we have to call it a day for today. So let me thank you for joining me here at WODC, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Janet.